in those areas to ensure that one, business is sustained, the economy develops, and also ensuring that there is job.
Yeah. So I thought,
That's not me, I promise.
okay.
And also ensuring that there is employment. So those are
Yazi angazi
our
mhlawumbe
functional areas.
ngiba-acknowledge bonke nabantu abakhona yini, you know, mhlawumbe fanele ngijisa
Is Banambi done with his speech on the side? Yeah, okay. So let me proceed. As I was saying, that we've got a number of functional areas, and those include township development, town center renewals. So when we talk about town center renewals, we're talking about areas like Isipingo, talking about areas like Pinetown, Tongati, Verulam. So these are your secondary town centers. Townships, we're basically looking at our primary township, primary areas that we are looking at is obviously big townships like Umlazi, townships like Kwamashu, as well as your smaller townships such as Inanda, Folweni, Kwasanti. So in all these areas, we've tried to have some form of intervention to try and get the local business people to either do a number of different types of investments. I really feel that you are disadvantaged by not seeing my presentation, so I'm going to be as slow as possible as I go through the presentation. The first area in terms of our strategic focus is basically, one, to deal with nodes and corridors, two, to deal with infrastructure investment to unlock development, three, to deal with developing sector support infrastructure, four, to deal with facilitation of SMME formalization, and finally, to also deal with government services and making sure that in the nodes and corridors where we actually have these particular government services. So what do we mean by nodes and corridors? The deputy city manager referred to economic precincts. So one of the things that we are increasingly developing is that we don't look at developing the whole township. We look at a particular precinct, and we focus on that particular precinct and make sure that in that precinct you are able to then make sure that you get private sector investment in that area. One, two, you are able to make sure that you bring in the right infrastructure for development, and then also you bring in infrastructure to allow for SMMEs to develop in that particular area. And I'll give you a good example that I think if people are from Umlazi, they will be familiar with. Ezimbuzini used to be one of those organically developed economic nodes. It's just down the road from here. About 10 years ago, we started developing a place for the actual goods market to be developed. Soon after that, we developed the Muti market, and we later developed recently we then started developing the Auto Hub, as well as started developing facilities for the traders. So all of a sudden you started seeing an area where people had just decided to found an intersection and said, in this intersection we will be able to do our trade, but through the government investment. You know, I think Uchina was originally there, but through government intervention, you started formalizing those people so that they could, one, trade with dignity, secondly, be able to grow their businesses because, you know, infrastructure can be expensive. You know, if you look at some of the investments that we've made in these areas, in that precinct alone, for example, the Auto Hub was 23 million, and it basically housed about 20 units. So that means the investment that was done by the city was about R1 million per unit. Now, for any person to be able to raise R1 million, you need a bond. Benedette, you'll help me. You'll help me with this. You need a bond of about 10,000 rands a year, and in your overheads, that is something that is prohibitive for you to be able to run a small business. So this is some of the assistance that we are giving to SMMEs to be able to trade correctly. Now, townships have been known to be, and I'm on slide number 3. I'm on slide number 3. So townships have been known to be dormitory areas and the supply of cheap labor to industrial buffer areas, such as your Prospecting in Umlazi, Phoenix Industrial Area in Kwamashu, Maran Hill in Kwasanti. So the way that apartheid planning did this was that it will create a township and then create an industrial area, and then and then create a residential area for other races, and then and so on and so forth. So townships were created purely to be residential hubs, so to speak, and a supplier of labor. So what has happened over the years post 1994? The economy started to change and to evolve. And with that, you saw industrial areas changing. The DCM spoke about logistic hubs that have created. So there's been less and less manufacturing that is happening, and more logistical hubs that have things. But logistical hubs, without having any criticism, do not employ people per square meter the same way that manufacturing would. And as a result, there's been less and less employment take up in these buffer zones, and therefore an increasing need for townships to start creating alternative ways of employment. And however, one of the good things is that there has been a skill set that has been developed organically within the townships. So, for example, when we create auto hubs, we are never really short of people who are going to take it up. You know, there are skills within the township. People that are operating out of a container then come into these auto hubs, and as well as people who are doing light manufacturing, making candles, and whatever small scale manufacturing. We then help them with these light industrial parks, and as well as now increasingly, because of budget constraints, we are starting to create more and more of these container parks, so for formalization, and to allow people to work in the formal business environment, particularly with the help of business support. One of the things that we've also learned is that for these nodes to function, there is a need for government services to be present. And your Sizakala centers, for example, provide customer services to the community and allow people to be able to pay for their services, which is important for us as government, because, you know, if people don't pay for their services, it makes it difficult for us to reinvest in those areas, and it also makes it difficult for us to maintain our infrastructure. So, but also these government facilities, such as your Sizakala Center, such as your Home Affairs and your and Department of Social Development, what they do is that they bring foot traffic into these nodes, and that foot traffic is important for people who are trading. It's important for because generally these nodes are usually anchored by a shopping center, and it's also that, so they also then bring in additional foot traffic, which is quite critical. I'm now going on to slide number 4. So as you can see from this particular slide, and I'm hoping you can see from the slide, Tepi, so you still can't see the slide. That young man is pressing. Okay. So he's also sharing my notes with you. So this is why it's important, ladies and gentlemen, to invest in some basic IT education and Shannon, ladies and gentlemen, Shannon is my boss, by the way, and I'm now lobbying for an IT hub within Umlazi. Shannon, I think a budget for that will be very useful. Part of the 1 billion, we're going to have an IT hub.
So ngizothola kona Sithombe sami. Angivele ngikhulume nala madoda. Yabo.
Ubambonambi ucela ukuthi kufakwe noma i-catch up kwi-borovos yakhe. That's why he's the boss. So, as I've highlighted, my team told me that I can't do a presentation without pretty pictures. If only they knew that half the presentation will go by without you guys seeing a single word. So these are the pretty pictures. The DCM spoke about economic precincts and economic nodes. As Imbuzini as I've highlighted, is one such area. Kwamnyandu, we've created, we've managed to attract a development there of about 300 million in terms of the private sector investment. But in addition to that, we've provided facilities for traders as well as the light industrial park. So increasingly, and I will speak about this later on, increasingly we're starting to crowd in these investments, both of private sector as well as the public sector. I'm going on to slide 5. One of the things that we have discovered is that in order to facilitate development in townships, there's a part of the work that is done by us as the city, but then there's also part that requires you as the private sector to participate in that. But we've found that the private sector tends to, or rather the local business people tend to lag behind in terms of developing their own nodes due to primarily that, you know, we don't work together as business people. And one of the solutions that we've sought is to start using some form of technical assistance to the local business people and some form of development facilitation. So what does that mean? That basically means that in an area like Umchepeni, for example, ubamntombela-ke uyawazi umchepeni ngoba udlula kancane nje before ufike estopini sakube emachubeni. In an area like Umchepeni, you found that it was not the local people that were benefiting from that development. So, for example, a portion of umhlaba wakamfeka ended up being sold off and was bought off by people from outside the area, and then was developed into a ShopRite. But there isn't really a long-term benefit for the local areas. So even people that actually own the land are not having long-term benefit out of that land because they are selling it off because, you know, there isn't sufficient planning to give them that kickstart in terms of getting your zoning right, in terms of getting getting your building plans and your designs for you to be able to approach a bank, because generally banks don't like you to come up with just an idea. They want you to come up with a complete solution. So we're wanting to use this development facilitation specifically to try and deal with packaging these investment opportunities. And we're starting in Umchepeni. We're going to be looking at Umlazi D, and increased as we go forward. We will look at Savannah Park in Savannah Park in the west, as well as Kwatabega, Claremont, going forward. So this is one of those solutions that we're wanting to implement. There's also funding that we have for infrastructure development in the form of the Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant. So if we look at Bridge City, for example, people who are familiar with Bridge City, a lot of the investment that has gone into Bridge City has actually came from a National Treasury grant to be able to allow us to develop it to what it is today. The road infrastructure, the waterborne storage that you find there, and a lot of the infrastructure that basically allows us to be able to sell those land parcels for development. So the NDPG is one such grant that we have for Umlazi area, Bridge City, as well as Mpumalanga. So those are the three main areas. I think we get about 70 million rands a year for those areas, for us to be able to bring in that particular development. So I'm going on to slide number 6. In terms of, I think Ubabu Tapelo will probably deal with this a lot more in detail, but one of the very important things that we do is to basically try and use our land as a catalyst for development. So by that I mean using strategic land owned by the municipality for economic development. So for example, in Umlazi, Kwamnyandu, there's a section that we have identified on the T side. So uthi noti bahlukaniswe i-railway line, ne? So on the T side, there is a big parcel of land that we've identified there, where because of the constraints for growth in Kwamnyandu, you now need to create an underpass underneath the railway line to then connect you to the other side of the railway line to be able to grow that particular node. So that is municipal land. It's basically, I almost said it's owned, but it's managed by Mr. Tapelo here. And what we're looking to do is basically open that land parcel up for further development. So there's also land parcels in Pinetown South. Pinetown South are those townships in the south of Pinetown, Kwasanti, Savannah Park, Clearwater, Mpola, and so on and so forth. So there are a number of land parcels there owned also by the city, which we will be releasing possibly in the next 12 months or so. And in those land parcels, we foresee us being able to generate quite big shopping facilities, residential facilities, and these are basically opportunities that have to be, as I said earlier, this is a call for partnership that have to be exploited by the local business people sitting around the table. Very soon, possibly, In January, February, we will be starting construction in the Wanozaza shopping center, and that particular precinct. So February 2022, we will be starting that. In Folweni, for example, we will be starting a business hive, and we've also identified land for commercial development. Kwatabega Light Industrial Park is another key land parcel that we've bought, and will be transforming it into a light industrial park, as well as also opening up opportunities for office space, as well as some retail opportunities in that area. I think F101 of Kwatabega was also came out, and I think we only had one respondent for that one. So the market seems to I think people missed it because it was the hype of elections. So that's another very critical land parcel that we've released to the market. So these things come out, and I know business people read ezasekakasini. So we advertise this on ezasekakasini for everyone to see. Claremont F91, this is a beautiful piece of land, and I'm marketing it now so that we don't get one respondent. This is a beautiful piece of land. It's right next to the P577 or this new road, and I think we should be going out on that within the next 12 months as well. 6 months. Yeah, so 6 months. So this is another beautiful piece of land. This is another beautiful piece of land that we will be releasing to the market as well. And you know, it's not just about. It's very important to then get the community to take that up. Recently, so that it doesn't seem like we are theorizing. Recently, we've just completed Midway Crossing in Ward 38 in Lindelani, and we had released that land for approximately 11 million, and the total investment in that area ended up totaling about 760 million. So in a period of 3 years. So when I talk about Kwanoza as a shopping center, you know, that's an opportunity that has also been taken up by the local business people. It's owned by the local business people, and they will be starting construction in February. When I talk about Maran Hill, those are future opportunities that needs to be exploited by the local people so that we can realize this economic development. Mchepeni, there are still opportunities that we're going to be facilitating in those areas. Pinetown South, St. Wendelins, Gwasant, Folweni, Claremont, etc. So these are things that you know, it's not theory, it's practical. It's something that we should be realizing in the next couple of months, so that in the next 3 to 5 years, you start seeing that economic activity happening in townships and being able to reach the goals that the mayor was so eloquently putting forward. I'm going to slide number 7. I think as I come to the end, and I think I spent quite a lot of time writing notes on this particular slide, looking at our challenges. One of the biggest challenges that we have in townships is definitely gross inequality and unemployment. Townships have always been characterized in the recent past with unemployment and inequality, and also, you know, once upon a time, I spent a lot of time studying economic theory, but having worked in the municipality for 15 years, those just become guiding principles. Some of the practicalities that we need to face, that we are faced with, You know, we know, for example, that when there's poor circulation in an area, there's poverty in that area. So, and townships are characterized with very low circulation of money in those economy. And this makes it difficult for SMMEs to develop, makes it difficult for SMMEs to actually have additional economic activity, and therefore SMME or micro enterprises remain survivalist for a very long time and don't grow out of that survivalist mode. So it's very important that, you know, our interventions then start dealing with that and how we keep the money, how we first get people employed, how we get them to trade, to shop in those areas, to trade in those areas, and to manufacture in those areas, so that you can then break out from the cycle of